Paul, are you, Paul's not ready. Good evening and welcome. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Wow. Okay, good evening and welcome. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to this really important meeting. I'm Natasha Spada. I'm the chair of the Needham Planning Board, and I'm calling the September 5th, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order. The meeting of the Planning Board is being conducted in a hybrid manner consistent with current state regulations and is being recorded. As a reminder, this meeting is being broadcast to the town's YouTube channel via Zoom and by the Needham channel, and is being recorded for publication, later viewing, and administrative purposes. All materials for this meeting are available on the town's website, needhamma.gov. And I'll call the roll for the record. When I call your name, please say you're present. I believe that we have 4 of us are here and Justin is online. So Adam Block and Artie Crocker.
Here.
And Paul Alpert.
Here.
And then Justin McCullen. Is Justin on? Okay, Alex, so just let us know when Justin is on. Great, and then today with us today is Lee Newman and also Alexander Klee and then Katie King. So our agenda tonight, we'll begin with a public hearing to review the MBTA Community Act zoning, which is why I assume most of you are here. And then number 2 is we're going to get a report from the planning director and the board members, and then we're going to look at the correspondence that we have received. So tonight we are going to review, oh, here's Justin.
Present.
Great. Tonight we're going to review 4 articles to amend the zoning bylaw regarding the creation of multifamily overlay district regarding zoning and map changes for 2 plans, the base plan and the neighborhood plan. Is there a motion to open the public hearing tonight and to waive the reading of the legal notice?
Second.
Okay, so the motion by Adam and a second by Artie. So regarding process, we have a presentation that is in tonight's packet. Oh, sorry. Let's take a vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Gotta do it a roll
And
call.
I have to do a roll call because Justin is, okay. So Justin, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Adam? Paul?
Aye.
Artie?
Aye.
And I, the chair. Okay, so it's unanimous. Regarding the process, we have the presentation that is in the packet that you should have been able to have access to this week. I will give an overview of the process, methodology, and timeline of the work that we've been doing. Lee Newman, Planning and Community Development Director, will give a technical review of the 4 articles. And then Katie King, the Deputy Town Manager, will present the most up-to-date fiscal impacts and school information. Then we will open up for public comment. So the next slide is about what is the MBTA Communities Act. And I know that some of you have been here for many of the meetings. Some of you know everything about it. Others are here for the first time. So I just want to give a quick overview in the next couple of minutes on it. So Massachusetts passed a new state law that requires 177 cities and towns served by the MBTA, including Needham, to establish a zoning district that's half a mile from a station in which multifamily is allowed by right. The requirements for Needham's compliance is 50 acres, 1,784 units, 15 dwelling units per acre, 90% of them to be located within a half a mile of a station. So I'm going to give you a big picture overview of our process to date, our methodology and timeline. And as I mentioned, Lee will present more of the technical zoning. And we understand there's going to be a lot of information that we're going to be giving you tonight, but we look forward to hearing your comments and questions, and your questions will be answered in the FAQ. So the next slide is a little bit about who the Hone Advisory Group was. So in September 2023, we created the Housing Needham Advisory Group, Hone, to lead the community engagement on how to comply with the MBTA Communities Act. The group advised the Select Board and Planning Board on the proposed zoning to bring to town meeting in October of 2024 for required compliance by the state by December of 2024. Hone was carefully selected for input and expertise, and we really didn't take it lightly. Our approach was holistic to be able to have the strongest group to work with the community on this complicated task. And the reason I'm saying this is because I want to make sure that everyone knows who was involved and what information we received, including all of the community engagement. The group includes Heidi Frail from the Select Board and myself as co-chairs. We also had Kevin Keene from the Select Board and Jean McKnight from the Planning Board as Hone members. The Select Board appointed Josh Levy and Karen Carlton from the Finance Committee, Liz Capania as a renter, and Michael Diener, the community member at large. He is also an attorney and on the Board of Assessors. The Planning Board appointed Ron Ruth, who's a land use attorney, Bill Lovett, who's a real estate developer, and then the town included Lee Newman, Alexandra Klee, and Katie King, who I just introduced. And we hired two very experienced consultants, Emily Innes from Innes Associates, and she was an advisor and she helped us draft the zoning. And we had Eric Halverson from RKG, who ran the models, created presentations, and provided analysis and projections. We consulted with town entities and consultants, including Chris Heap from Town Council, Department of Public Works, which included Engineering, Highway Division, Water, Sewer and Drains Division, the Needham Public Schools, the Finance Department, the Building Department, the Police Department, and the Fire Department. In addition, we have had an excellent community input as we have tonight. It started with unprecedented communication from the town about these meetings, and we have experienced some of the largest community attendance and input in recent history. Hone worked hard to make sure we had extensive community input through 3 community meetings. Our group has been watching how other communities have also addressed the MBTA Communities Act, and I can say that I'm super proud of Needham. Of the Needham community, we have been able to do this in an incredibly respectful way, and we have received extensive communication from the community beyond those meetings. Some of you have been attending from the beginning, and some of you are from the first time. I've seen some new faces, but thank you all for coming. This is really important. And we have taken all of the community information from the last 3 meetings to make this a richer process and to create a most comprehensive zoning article. What we have heard from the community in the past meetings is that some in the community want more housing, some in the community want less housing, and some of the community are right in the middle. So we encourage and respect all the input that we're going to hear tonight and appreciate everyone being here. So I want to make sure that everyone understands that everyone in Hone and in the town and town boards, they want the same thing that you want, and that is to do what is best for Needham with full community input. I know this is extremely complicated for all of us and with all these zoning articles, but I know that we can do this, I really do, and that we can do it well as a community. So let me start with the Hone charge, which is the next slide, Alex. So the Hone charge was to lead broad engagement effort to envision and shape zoning. We utilized the 2022 Needham Housing Plan as a starting point. We evaluated the build outs, the projects, and fiscal, school, and infrastructure analysis to consider related zoning elements, including affordable housing, the requirements and parking minimums, to update select planning board and FinCom during the entire process, to recommend draft zoning to select and planning boards to submit to the state and town meeting, and to lead broad engagement efforts to envision and shape the zoning. So the next slide is about fiscal impact analysis. So some of the items we had to do, and one of the most important was a fiscal impact analysis that was completed by RKG, our consultant, to understand the potential tax revenue and the town and schools operational costs to adding this housing to the town. The fiscal analysis has since been revised to incorporate some changes to the property at 100 West Street that is a prime location for housing. Katie will provide some information later on in the presentation with our most recent information. So the next slide is about methodology, and it includes the assessment for capital impacts from town departments that I mentioned previously. I know there have been questions about capacity in previous meetings, and we have done a comprehensive review during the Hone meetings and have done subsequent studies since then as well, and we'll update you on all of those. Staff compared the following growth projections with capital infrastructure systems, the known needs, and the proposed improvement projects, which included the number of units, the student enrollment, and the population growth. We spoke to police, fire, and EMS, and there were no anticipated capital impacts since we have new facilities. The schools, the likely build-outs of both zoning plans can be accommodated with the preferred school master plan scenarios. Since your last meeting, there is additional information And then this recent information Katie will discuss later on in the presentation. Traffic. Since our last meeting, we hired GPI traffic consultants and they did a technical traffic analysis to evaluate the potential impacts of rezoning. The GPI analyzed 15 key intersections in the area proposed for rezoning and compared it to anticipated 2034 traffic volumes. Overall, the building scenarios for both zoning plans identified 9 intersections for recommended mitigation. With the recommended mitigation measures that would occur, the traffic system will maintain an acceptable level of service for both of the plans that we're going to be showing tonight. Regardless of the zoning proposals, I do want to say that DPW has many projects and traffic improvement projects. You've probably seen them all over town, and there are many more to come. And they will address 7 of the 9 intersections recommended for mitigation without having to do anything to do with this. So I just wanted to give kudos to the DPW. So, okay. So the next one is stormwater and water and sewer. So that's the next slide, Alex. The town is currently doing a stormwater study that will take the zoning into consideration. And I think most of us know that. Water and sewer, DPW has indicated that the town has enough capacity to support the proposed zoning. They've requested funding for water and sewer master plans in fiscal year 2026. Okay, so the next slide is the timeline to date. So the Housing Plan Working Group, an adoption of an adopted housing plan occurred between October 2021 and January 2023. The creation and appointment of HONE occurred between March 2022 and August 2023. And HONE launched a year ago in September of 2023. We have had 3 community meetings, 1 in November of 2023 and 2 this year, 1 in January and 1 in March. So the next slide shows what's happening now. So we issued the final report and the HONE report and zoning on April of 2024 to the state. The state reviewed it from May to August of 2024. And I'm happy to say that we received minimal comments, which means that our group and consultants did a thorough job. So we were able to make those tweaks and those changes to the zoning articles that you will see tonight. Planning board updates to the zoning articles occurred in August of 2024, which is last month. And then today is the planning board public hearing, which it could possibly, we could have one other date on September 17th, but there could also be an opportunity that it may be closed tonight. The planning board will finalize the zoning for Warren on September 24th, 2024. And then the special town meeting will be October 21st. And then the final state review, it has to be into the state between November and December of 2024. So just to give you the big picture of what we've done today, where we are today and where we're going. So the next slide is existing zoning. I know this is tiny. I know this is super tedious, but we have 2 pages of them. And I want to give you a big picture before Lee starts going into super technical, because I think it's important to understand where we've been. So yes. This is our existing zoning. So what we have is we have the articles that Lee's going to present, and we have community impact, but we have the last meeting of the planning board to review all of the comments from the community. So I'm going to keep on going, but then we want to hear comments. So that's where I'm trying to get to. So zoning or the rule, I just want to just in general, zoning or rules created to divide land by use, density, and dimensions. Zoning is not development. I've been hearing a lot of people saying that we're going to redevelop the entire Needham. When we create or revise zoning, it doesn't mean that we're developing the land. It means that we're revising the rules to make sure that we agree what will be built in the future. So I just want to make sure some people, we have some younger members that may not know what zoning really means. And so it's really important to remember. Something to note is that multifamily housing is currently allowed in all districts in Needham by right or by special permit, except for the industrial and business districts. We allow single family housing and 2-family housing in those districts, but currently don't allow multifamily. So in general, multifamily is allowed everywhere except those 2 districts. Parking is currently 1.5 spaces per unit. Maximum dwellings per acre, you're going to hear Lee mention It's currently 18 dwellings per acre. The height, as of right, is 2.5 to 3 stories and up to 4 stories in Avery Square by special permit. The FAR, which is the floor area ratio, which is the proportion of square footage allowed on site based on the size of the site. Currently, most districts, and you'll see it up here, I think it's the next one, Alex, if you want to, it's 0.7 FAR. So that means that if you have a 10,000 square foot lot with 1 FAR, it's 10,000 square foot building. So most of our districts have 0.7 FAR, but it ranges from 0.35 to 1.1 FAR depending on the district. And then we also have a series of overlay districts that increase density in certain districts. And I want to just mention those because beyond the zoning, these overlay districts in 3 locations were created in 2009. So in May of 2009, Needham enacted zoning to implement the recommendations of the Needham Center Plan for 3 zoning districts in Needham Center, Chestnut Street, and Garden Street. And the purpose was to encourage at an appropriate scale, density, and mix of use and design the redevelopment and infill development of existing properties. And so briefly, the height and density were increased in Needham Center to a 3-story profile with 4 stories, remainder of the district set at 4 stories, and an FAR of 2.0, so higher than this. As it relates to Chestnut Street corridor, the height was set at 4 stories with an FAR of 2.0, larger than this. And as it relates to Garden Street, the height was set at 3 stories with an FAR of 1.0 for housing and 1.2 for mixed use. And access to this increased density was by special permit. So the planning board would review it as a special permit. So developments to date based on that overlay from 2009. Under the overlay rules, only 1 project has been permitted to date. That property is located at 50 Dedham Ave, where it's a 3+1, so a 4-story building, mixed-use building, which includes 10 residential units, 1 affordable, and 2 first-floor retail units, each less than 800 square feet. The permit was issued in July of 2012. So the conclusion is even though with the changes of zoning to bring it up to 2.0 and 4, we have been unable to create any new housing except for a handful of as-of-right housing projects and 1 project since 2009. So I just, for people that think that we're going to get all these units, that's not the case. The case is that we changed the rules and it still doesn't work. So we would like to increase housing in the town. And hopefully with these zoning changes and the community input, we will be able to create, a reasonable amount. So, so the next slide is just the comparison of existing zoning scenarios. So existing zoning allows for 1,019 units as of right, and 1,636 units by special permit. It's not that different from the requires of the MBTA Communities Act of what they're asking us to do, but only 775 units are existing units. As you can see, the NA of the existing zoning unit capacity and with the overlay under business and industrial is because multifamily is not allowed in those units. So the units that were existing are probably non-conforming units. So the big picture is that based on our community process, we have created 2 plans that Lee's going to explain in a second, a base plan, and then we have a neighborhood plan. And, but I wanted to just explain based on the zoning that I just discussed, what the big picture changes are, because she's going to go into full detail. But if we know what the big picture is, then when she goes into the full detail, hopefully it'll be more palatable. Sorry, Julie. Parking. So we are reducing the minimum parking from 1.5. It's a minimum parking from 1.5 to 1 space per unit in both plans. The maximum dwellings per acre will remain at 18 dwellings per acre in the base plan and increased in the industrial, the business, and the apartment districts in the neighborhood plan to create more density. Height, as of right housing will be 3 to 4 story range, which is what we have now, and 3 to 4.5 stories as of right in the neighborhood plan with incentives of commercial on first floor and workforce housing in some of the districts. And then floor area ratio, the base plan is generally the same in 0.7, except for at Avery Square at 100 West Street, and it increases in the neighborhood plan to create density in the Chestnut Street corridor, business, and apartment districts. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lee to talk about the actual articles.
And good evening. And your introduction, I hope I don't put everybody to sleep, but let's walk through the details of the zoning. sorry, okay, so as Natasha explained, the zoning is basically being presented in the framework of having two approaches. This is the base compliance plan. This is a plan that follows the actions of the existing zoning we have here in Newton. And this is a scenario that's intended to actually get us to the minimum. Follows the rules that we have in our existing zoning. It doesn't change the dimensional standard. The next is the neighborhood housing plan. It kind of sits on top of the base housing plan. It provides for greater density in terms of height and FAR. Introduces housing into areas where it wasn't currently allowed. And to actually increase the amount of housing that's being built. So it shows up on the slide. Base plan that's down to 1,200, 1,900. The neighborhood plan gets it down to 3,350. And this is what the zoning enables. It's not how many units are actually physically constructed. Next slide. Sorry. Okay, so the approach here is to do this through a series of 4 articles. And the first article that the hearing is being held on is an article that actually creates the zoning for the base compliance plan. The second article actually creates the map changes that are required under our zoning bylaw to implement that base plan. The third article amends, if the first article is successful at town meeting, the third article amends the first article to basically implement the neighborhood housing plan. And then the fourth article makes the map adjustments that are required to actually implement the neighborhood housing plan. Next slide. So this is a slide that's showing you the location of the affected districts in both the base compliance scenario and the neighborhood housing plan. And you can see that the districts are located along the spine of Needham, basically Highland Avenue, starting in the north at close to Webster Street, moving all the way down through the center, down Chestnut Street, down to the junction. And in those districts, there are a number of existing apartment districts. There's Hamilton Highlands, Avery Square Condos, Rosemary Ridge, the Highlands, and Charles Court. Both these plans are grabbing those units, making them part of the MBTA compliance. And so we're counting existing units on the ground, and zoning is basically in place to implement them. And housing is being introduced in the remainder business districts at different densities as a function of whether you're in the base plan or you're in the neighborhood plan. And there are some distinctions in terms of the boundaries between the two plans. The neighborhood housing plan actually does not include the apartment districts further north, Hamilton Highlands and Avery Square. It was felt that we wanted to actually bring the greater density down closer to transit. And so we switched that out and we added apartment districts at Denmark Lane in the Suites of Needham. And additionally, there was an apartment district that we were allowed to capture, Charles Court Apartments, which is outside of that spine, but the MBTA rules enabled us to capture that district and count it as well. Next slide. So this is a table. It's kind of speaking to what Natasha spoke to earlier, which is giving you what the rules are under the base compliance plan. And essentially it follows the rules that we have in our existing zoning. With the exception, height across the districts, the business districts is going from 2.5 stories to 3 stories. And again, and the parking requirement is going, this is the minimum parking requirement the town has to have, is moving from a 1.5 to a 1. Next slide. This is the dimensional standards that the zoning would implement for the neighborhood housing plan. I think as Natasha mentioned, the height is going up to 4 stories in the apartment district, the business district, and in Chestnut Street Business District. And also a provision of encouraging mixed-use development is being added. So you can have an extra half story going to 4.5 stories in the business district and in Chestnut Street West, if commercial is provided on the first floor, or if at least 7.5% of the housing is dedicated as workforce housing. Next slide. So now I'm going to walk you through the individual districts themselves, so you can see what the existing zoning parameters look like and how they change under the base and the neighborhood scenarios. So this slide is the slide of the apartment districts, or the apartment areas that would be covered under the base plan. And so they include, I think in the slide A, Avery School and Hamilton Highlands. Under slide B, the Highlands, which is located by St. Joseph's Church. The Rosemary Ridge Lake Apartments under slide C, which is off of Hillside Avenue, and Charles Court Apartments, which is off of Greendale Avenue. And you can see when you compare what the existing zoning parameters are for that district and what the base provides, that it's basically following the same set of rules. They're not changing at all in these cases, so density is not changing. The parking standard, though, is changing from a 1.5 to a 1. Next slide. So this slide now shows the apartment districts that would be covered under the neighborhood housing plan. Again, it has the Highlands in it, it has Rosemary Ridge in it, it has Charles Court Apartments. It adds in Denmark Lane and Honeywell at Highland. And here, what's happening is that we're proposing that the height be increased to 4 stories from 3 in those existing apartment districts, that the FAR go up, and that the number of dwelling units permitted per acre go up, so that in existing apartment districts, you could have greater density and build out. Next slide. This is showing you the business district in Needham, which is the block where Sudbury Farms is located, between Rosemary Street and May Street. In this district, multifamily housing is not currently allowed. And so under the base plan, or both the base and neighborhood plan, we're proposing to introduce the use into this area where it's not currently allowed. And in the base scenario, it follows the rules that we have currently for existing zoning, so that your density isn't going to go up under that scenario. Under the housing plan, it's proposed to increase the height to 4 stories, to increase the FAR, and to incent mixed-use development by offering greater density if first floor space is dedicated to retail, and if workforce housing is provided at 7.5% of total units. Next slide. This is Avery Square. It covers just one property, 100 West Street, across from Trader Joe's. For those who are old timers, it was known as the Carter Building. In this case, I think this is probably the property that is most likely to be redeveloped under these rules, or in a short-term basis. And what's proposed here is to actually increase the FAR to a 1.3 as of right, and to allow a 4-story by special permit with an increased FAR of 1.7. Now, currently that building can be built out at a 1.1 under the overlay rules with the 4-story, but the 4-story is restricted to 35% of the floor plate of the 4th story. So that's the proposal for Avery Square. Next slide. This is Chestnut Street. Essentially, it's the Chestnut Street Business District, but it includes Garden Street between May Street and Great Plain Avenue. And it includes Chestnut Street south of Great Plain Avenue to Junction Street. So in the existing zoning, the height is 2.5 stories, is proposed to go to 3, and the parking ratio is changing. So what's happening really effectively in this district with the change is that the height's going up by 1/2 story, and it's being converted from a special permit process to an as-of-right process. Next slide. This one's a little bit more complicated. Under the neighborhood plan, I think as Natasha mentioned, the goal is to increase the density along the Chestnut Street corridor and within the existing apartment districts. That's where the change is really happening. But it was recognized that really Chestnut Street functions differently on its east and its west side. On the west side, it's bounded by the MBTA Railroad, which separates it from the residential districts along Maple Street and Oak Street. And on the east side, which is the hospital side, it actually bleeds right into the neighborhood. So it was felt that the rules under the neighborhood plan needed to acknowledge that distinction, and that the greater density could happen on the west side and not on the east side. So under the base compliance plan, basically it follows the rules of the underlying zoning, but under the housing plan, it allows for 4 stories on the west side, 3 stories on the east side, and allows for 4.5 stories with that mixed-use development component on the west side and 3.5 on the east. Pardon me? Oh, workforce housing was housing we felt that would be available to people who made between 80% of area median income and 120% of area median income, which is a population that we wanted to see served. And so that was the reason for the incentive. Hillside, next. So this is the Hillside Avenue Business District. It's essentially runs from, I think, West Street up to approximately Honeywell. It's where the senior center is located. The MBTA parking lot is over there. Again, under the base plan, it pretty much follows the rules of the existing zoning, but we are introducing, actually housing is allowed in this district. And we're under the housing plan, it's the density is going up just slightly to increased FAR and additional dwelling units per acre, so that the building's being made slightly larger from what the existing zoning allows, which is the model under the base plan. Next slide. This is for the industrial district. And there are 3 industrial areas that are being covered under this proposal. Includes Hillside Avenue from West to Rosemary Street, which you see under option A. It includes Crescent Road area, which you see under option B. And it includes Denmark Lane, which is off of Maple Street at Great Plain Avenue under option C. In this case, housing is not currently allowed in the district, and it's being introduced. And we're moving from a lot coverage requirement to an FAR requirement, but overall, the volume remains the same as it is under the existing zoning. Multifamily housing. Yes. Next slide. So this is a slide that shows you what happens under the neighborhood housing plan. Under the neighborhood housing plan, the Hillside Avenue remains in the industrial classification, and Crescent Road stays in the industrial classification with a rule change, and Denmark Lane moves into a straight apartment district. And what's proposed in this case is to, again, slightly increase by the FAR and dwelling units per acre, the density that would be allowed in those districts. So here's an next slide. So here's an overview of what's happening really across the various scenarios that I've laid out. As you can see, and what Natasha, I think, mentioned earlier, on the ground, there are 775 units currently built. Needham's existing zoning rules under our as of right kinds of rules will generate 1,019 units in terms of a build out, a potential build out under zoning. Under our current overlay rules, you get to 1,636. Under the base plan, it takes you up to 1,924. And under the neighborhood housing plan, it takes you to 3,350. I think, so the overall increase between the base plan and the neighborhood plan is 1,426 units. And most of that increased density is coming from 2 places. It's coming from the Chestnut Street corridor, which is accounting for 70% of the increase between the base and the neighborhood plan. And 25% of it's coming from increased density in the apartment districts, and all the others are marginally increasing between those two options. I think it was felt that it made sense to increase density where there were existing apartments, and it made sense to increase density along the Chestnut Street corridor, given its proximity to Needham Center and the town's long-term goal of seeing it redeveloped. So next slide. Now I'm just going to talk briefly about what the process would look like in terms of how the planning board would be reviewing and approving these projects. It's anticipated that applications would be filed with the planning board, that there would be a special permit process. But I think it's important to understand that these uses are as of right. As such, the planning board can't deny them if they meet the dimensional requirements, the setback requirements, and our design standards and development standards. The planning board can impose reasonable conditions on them, which would include reviewing stormwater for compliance, adjusting parking, causing refinements to be made in terms of how the site plan was presented. But the conditions that they propose or they place on it cannot be so great as to actually effectively render the project non-buildable. Next slide. So all the projects would, of course, need to meet the building code, fire code, health code, DPW regulations in terms of water, sewer, stormwater, and any local wetlands regulations or environmental regulations that would apply. Given the limited nature, the town would not be in a position to actually require off-street public infrastructure improvements as a condition of approval. But the flip side of that is the town is under no obligation to make those investments itself. And then lastly, I just want to point out that the zoning proposal calls for at least 12.5% of the units to be in buildings with 6 or more units to be deed restricted and made available to people who make 80% of area median income. This is similar to the requirements we have in other zoning districts. As part of the MBTA process, we were required to do an economic analysis to document that it would be economically feasible to build at that percentage of affordability, and we have done that and presented it to the state. And also, by setting the standard at 12.5%, it helps Needham to continue to stay above the 10.5% or 10% threshold required of affordability townwide.
So, can you hear me? No, okay, no. The visualization, so we wanted to show everyone what we have currently in town and what we can visualize for 2 to 4 story housing. So the existing Needham multifamily housing, as you can see, ranges from 2 to 4 stories. At 1,110 Great Plain Avenue, we have 17 units per acre. At 90 to 98 Dedham Avenue, 8 units per acre. 401 to 405 Honeywell Street, 27 units per acre. The Highlands is 14 units per acre. Denmark Lane is 12 units per acre, and 25 High Street is 10 units per acre. The next slide shows Stephen Palmer at 18 units per acre. 50 Dedham Avenue, that's the 3+1, the only one that has been built with the overlay at 43 units per acre. 100 West Street is 36 units per acre. Rosemary Ridge, 18 units per acre. Charles River Landing at 44 units per acre, and Rosemary Lake at 29 units per acre. So just to give you an idea of what the units per acre would look like in real life. Now let's look at height. There's different ways of housing, of multifamily housing, including townhomes. You can see these are 3.5 stories, 3 to 4 story multifamily, denser single family homes. There's a 3-story multifamily at the bottom, 3-story multifamily in the middle, and then live and work townhomes on the right-hand side. So again, it's kind of showing what, possibilities of what have been built of these types of housing. And then there's mixed use multifamily housing. 2 to 3 story mixed use multifamily shown at the top, a 3-story one here on the right-hand side top, 3 to 3.5 stories down at the bottom, so that you can get an idea of what 2 to 3.5 stories feels like in a suburban setting. And so the next slide shows, so as Lee went through every district, we'd like to go through every district to remind everyone visually what that means for height. So on the bottom is Chestnut Street East, where it goes from, there's the base height and then the slash and then the neighborhood housing height. So the 2, 3 to 3.5 stories in the Chestnut Street East. Chestnut Street West, 3 to 4.5 stories. Chestnut Street East, 3 to 3.5 stories. So we were very careful at thinking about how they're adjacent to neighborhoods, if there's the train line and everything, to understand the differences in height and opportunity for that. Okay, the next slide is moving up. So we already talked about Chestnut Street West and Chestnut Street East, but there's Chestnut Street West up above that also has the 3 and 4.5 story by the neighborhood housing height. So the next slide goes up to, there's an industrial apartment A1 that is 3 stories by base height and 4 stories by the neighborhood housing height. And then the next slide, so we're just kind of going up the corridor. The Chestnut Street Garden Street is 3 for the base height and 3.5 for the neighborhood. And as if we continue to go up to the next slide, we have the business district. So 3 base height, 4.5 neighborhood housing. And on the apartment A1 on the other side of the street of Highland, it's 3 for the base height and 4 for the neighborhood housing. Then if we continue to go up to the next slide, apartment A1 at Rosemary Lake Apartments, that area is 3 by base height, 4 by the neighborhood housing. Industrial Hillside is 3 base height, 3 neighborhood housing height. And then if we go to the next slide, Avery Square Business is 3 by right and 4 by special permit. And then moving up, the Hillside Avenue Business is 3 base height and neighborhood height. There's an apartment A1, which has a 4 for the height for the neighborhood. And then the apartment A1 above, which is 3 in the base height. So Lee, does that mean that it's 3 for both? Okay. It's not in the, okay, that's because it's not included in the neighborhood housing plan. That's correct. Industrial Crescent is 3 for the base height and 3 for the neighborhood housing height. So just so that you can see where they were allocated and why they were allocated so that we can get input. Okay, so the next slide is apartment A1. It's 3 base height and 4 neighborhood housing height. And then the next slide is the updated fiscal analysis of school enrollment projections that Katie's going to speak to.
Thank you. We are in the home stretch. You guys are hanging in there. So I do want to give updates on analyses that we have redone since Hone's proposal in April. Alex, next slide, please. So the first one is the propensity for change model. The question that this is answering is what parcels are actually likely to develop. And the methodology is a financial one. So basically, what's the value of the property today? If it was redeveloped under the various zoning scenarios, what would the value be in that future case? And if the value of the property increases by more than 50%, it would show up on this graphic as green, either the light green or the darker green. And only those developments that turn green are the ones that we count as being likely to redevelop based on the added value to the owner. Next slide, please. So I'm only going to show the Avery Square Business District. We did this for each of the districts, but the only thing that has changed since April is in the Avery Square Business District. The green parcel right in the middle is 100 West. The floor area ratio was increased in the zoning proposal from 1.0 to 1.3. That flipped it to green. So in our earlier analysis, we did not have this as a parcel likely to build. It now is based on the new zoning dimensions. I do want to note that the unit count is 243 units now. Under the previous FAR of 1.0, it was 186 units. So that incremental increase was 56 units. Next slide, please. So this table summarizes when we add all those changes in, where do we land? This has been reflected in earlier slides, but the only rows that have changed are the Avery Square business and the total units. Everything else has remained the same. We've added 243 units to the likely build out for both the base and the neighborhood housing plan, because again, previously we did not think that this was likely to flip, and now under the model it is. For the full build out for the base and the neighborhood housing plan, we've only added the 56 incremental units due to the increase in the floor area ratio. Next slide, please. So as we know, with more units come more students. And as I mentioned at the last planning board meeting, we also wanted to take the opportunity to take a really hard look at the assumptions that we were using in our school enrollment projections, so that we could run this analysis all at the same time. This is the new enrollment projections for students. It has increased both because we changed the assumption that we used for a number of students that would be generated out of 2-bedroom units, and also because we have the increased unit count. The number is not listed here on the slide, but I want to put this in a little bit of context. If you take, just as an example, 62 units for the base likely build out, and you divide that over the number of units, it's 465 units from the previous slide. That ratio is 0.13 students per unit. Our previous analysis was mathing out to 0.08 students per unit. So it's increased from 0.08 now to 0.13. And that gives us good context when we go on to the next slide. I think I want to speak to how we affirmed our assumptions in this new analysis, and then also what do we do with this information now relative to impacts for capital and operating. So we, on the student aged children ratio table, as I mentioned, we increased the rate used for 2-bedroom market and 2-bedroom affordable since the analysis in April. And the way we reaffirmed these assumptions is really 2 ways. First, we have data from the Needham Public Schools about the actual number of students that have enrolled in the district from Charles River Landing, the Kendrick, and the Modera over the last 5 years. So we averaged out over the last 5 years, how many students have we actually generated from the largest multifamily developments in town. That average in terms of students per unit is between 0.12 and 0.13. So that was a good gut check for us. The number of students that we have actually seen come to Needham Public Schools from the developments that we have had in town for 5+ years matches these new assumptions. The second way that we reaffirmed this analysis was talking with McKibben Demographics. So this is the consultant that Needham Public Schools has used for more than a decade. They update the enrollment projections for the school committee each year. We shared the updated enrollment assumptions and data with the principal of McKibben Demographics, and he agreed with our assumptions and affirmed that he was comfortable with the figures that we were using. So that leads us to what does it mean that we now have higher student impacts or student enrollment projections? And really, we need to think about this in 2 ways. What is the impact on potential capital costs, and what's the impact on our potential operating costs? First, in terms of capital, I think many of you know the school committee has a preferred master plan that would renovate the Pollard to become a 6 through 8 school. It would turn the High Rock into a 6 elementary school, and it would renovate the Mitchell School to a 3 or a 4 section school. And so we took the McKibben enrollment projections that the school district already has for the next 15 years, and we chose the peak year out of those 15 years. What year has the most students anticipated? And then we added these new student enrollment projections from RKG on top of that peak year. And then we said, if the school master plan is built, do we have enough seats in those new buildings to support that highest peak year enrollment? And the conclusion is yes, under both the base plan and the neighborhood housing plan likely build out, there is enough capacity under the preferred master plan for that. And that plan obviously speaks to elementary and middle school levels. The school master plan does not add capacity to the high school. The current capacity is 1,800. And we just exceed that by about 1% for student projections under the neighborhood housing plan likely build out. So that's putting it into context for capital considerations. And on the next slide, we get to operating budget. So the analysis we ran, RKG ran for the town is a fiscal impact analysis. And really the core question here is the increased revenue that the town will receive from new multifamily housing going to be enough to cover the costs that the town will also incur to support those new residents, both on the town side and on the school side. And so what I want people to see is not all of the different numbers and the exact amounts, but really that what we want to know the most is the net fiscal impact positive or negative? And it's positive in all four scenarios. So we can anticipate under these projections that we will receive enough revenue to support the costs that we will incur for the units. And I'm happy to answer questions because this is new information for the board. Or we can close it out.
Okay. Justin, does Justin have a question? Or can we move on to the public comment?
I'm all good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Katie. So the next step is as we are today. I think there were 2 more slides, but I think, no, it's okay. I think we can just start, we can open it up to public comment. It was showing again, the timeline of today being September 25th, September 5th. September 24th is when the planning board finalizes the zoning for the warrant. It's for special town meeting October 21st, and then the final state review is in December. And so with that, I'd like to open up to public comment. As we open up to public comment, I just wanted to remind attendees of our ground rules for public hearings to ensure an accurate public record and to enable a fair platform to hear from our neighbors. So please state your name. Most of you know this already. Please state your name and address clearly for the record. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes so that we can hear from as many people as possible. If you have multiple points to make and need more time, we will genuinely attempt to return to you after others that have not spoken are given a chance to speak. Please address your comments through the chair, and simply saying that you agree with the previous speaker is a great way to have your voice heard while making time available to hear from our other neighbors. So with that, I will start with you.
And in here, we're allowed to move the mic. I think we're not allowed to do that in the town meeting. Hi, everybody. Actually, well, I can't really do that. I'll just squat down. Wells Blanchard. I live at 580 High Rock Street. First off, I just want to thank you and everybody involved for all of the hard work that you've put in. This is something that we have to do. It's law, and it's something that is the right thing to do. So I am in favor of the work. I do have concerns or questions about the student ratios. It was really helpful to hear the new data that you guys shared having to do with our existing multifamily, because that was going to be one of my questions. But one of the things, so there's a few different questions, but one of the things I was wondering is, can we get the raw data and the analysis that led to these assumptions? Because I think that it would be really helpful to be able to compare, okay, in those existing units, how many are 1, how many are studios, how many are 2, 3 bedrooms? And to be able to have that level of transparency would really help everyone to feel more comfortable with the assumptions. I did find on the internet an article written by the Citizens Housing and Planning Association. It's a research article. It was actually from way back in August 2003, but it does have specific data on neighboring communities. And it showed that Andover has for multifamily, Andover has a 0.47 per unit, Lexington 0.58 per unit, and Andover, sorry, one is North Andover, and then North Andover 0.61. So those are much higher, obviously, than the assumptions that we have here, which is one of the things that's made me a little bit more concerned. So there was another question that I had. Oh, just wanted to make the point that the two housing units that you guys brought up, those aren't close to an MBTA. So they probably are going to, there's going to probably be a fundamental difference in the way that those kind of flesh out in terms of parents. I don't know whether it will be which direction it could go, if it's going to be more or less because it happens to be close to a commuter rail. But I do think that that could potentially cause differences. So I think that's my question is, can we get that data? And also just, have we looked at neighboring communities? Because it does seem like those communities have much higher numbers.
Sure. Any other? I can't see anyone. Can you bring? Okay. I can see Justin, but I don't think he's in a comment.
I'm just viewing, but yes.
So James Goldstein, I believe you're coming in. Please turn on your mic.
Yes, thank you. I just turned on my mic. James Goldstein, 40 Coolidge Ave. I'm speaking on behalf of the steering committee of Progressive Needham. And Progressive Needham is a grassroots nonprofit organization of Needham residents that promotes progressive policies in the town and at the state level. And we're a chapter of Progressive Massachusetts. We have been consistently involved in the town's planning process for the rezoning required by the MBTA Communities Act. We've attended almost all of the HONE meetings over the past year, and our members have submitted comments to HONE on several occasions. Progressive Needham has been very impressed by how thorough and careful HONE has been in the complex process of meeting the requirements of the MBTA Communities Act in a way that is sensitive to Needham's existing land use and its character. Progressive Needham deeply appreciates the time and effort that the members of HONE have devoted to this process, as well as their openness and responsiveness to community input. We are well aware of the housing crisis in town and throughout the region. We believe it is critical for Needham to create opportunities for the development of a range of multifamily housing in Needham at a variety of price points and sizes that will be more attainable for more people. More housing choices are critical to help serve seniors, young people and families, and our regional workforce. Progressive Needham strongly supports the proposed neighborhood housing plan rezoning. We believe it is a thoughtful and balanced plan to promote additional multifamily housing in appropriate locations near MBTA transit corridors. We understand that rezoning does not equate to housing production. Creating new housing is left to the private market and depends on overcoming a number of important factors, including property owners' willingness to develop their land as housing or to sell their land. And as Natasha alluded to, the vast majority of the land in the rezoning area is already developed. Other factors that it has to overcome is financing availability, favorable market conditions, and others. Therefore, even with the proposed zoning changes associated with the neighborhood housing plan, actual production of new housing is projected to take many years and be modest regarding the total number of units created. We therefore encourage the planning board to support the 2022 Needham Housing Plan goals by endorsing the MBTA neighborhood plan zoning that will allow for needed housing in our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Anyone else would like to come up for public? Oh, who's that?
Artie, this was mistimed.
Artie's in charge of the mic tonight.
It's kind of a little long. Thank you. Thank you very much. Susan Herman, 13 Cary Road, Needham Heights. I am speaking tonight to bring attention to 100 West Street, the Carter Building, which has been included in the MBTA zoning. This project should not move forward until the surrounding neighborhoods affected fully understand what is being proposed. Many residents around 100 West Street have been investing in their homes, whether they are single or multifamily properties. The proposed large-scale development on this site is critical to the future of these neighborhoods. The current proposal included in the proposed MBTA zoning is 187 units on 4.28 acres, far exceeding regulations contained in the MBTA Act. The planning board, along with the lawyer for Well LCB, are considering more than 187 units on a possible fourth floor, some kind of camouflaged structured parking, and the inclusion of part of the residentially zoned parking lot. There are likely additional considerations being requested by Well LCB and being considered by the planning board for a special permit for the acreage. A more modest development similar to 797 Highland Avenue has a density that can work. This development is 15 units per acre, is visually appealing and would attract a diverse group from young families looking to begin their investment in Needham to seniors looking to downsize. It would encourage foot traffic, create green space, and help move Needham Heights towards environmental equity. It would help achieve a more livable community in Needham Heights. Lastly, we have not seen any proposals for street-facing retail, which would enhance the neighborhood by attracting small businesses, making the area more walkable and vibrant. In light of the above, we ask that the planning board reimagine this portion of the MBTA zoning to address the issues of walkability, green space, and environmental equity. The large-scale development being proposed under the MBTA Act simply does not meet the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Herman. Do we, no one else on this? So the gentleman with the white shirt. Marty.
I learned.
He's out of a job.
I've been fired. Kevin Albert, 63 Melrose Ave. Few questions and a comment. I attended one of the earlier meetings in the year, and at that point we had 3 options. So the 2 options that are still relevant today, is it the number, the base 1 and the number 3? Is that what we have now, or is it number 2 that's really the neighborhood?
It's the base plan and then an iteration based on community input.
And that was closer to option 3 or option 2 that we
Closer
had?
to option 2.
Okay. I'm curious, at the time, I remember we voted, which one we preferred and all that. Have the stats on how people voted been were made available and shared?
Yes,
Okay,
it's
be
on
great
the
to see that
website.
again. I'm curious. Are we aware on the number of towns that have already passed the new zoning? How many are over what the requirements are? Because I feel like the articles I've read is there's no other town, or maybe there's one. I'm not sure. So I think I read there's over 60 towns that have already passed the new zoning laws. How many of those are actually over compliant versus what the requirements are? And the affordable housing, the numbers you have there of 80% to 120 of median income, that's medium income of Needham, or medium income of the state, or medium income of what? Because that number obviously is much higher. Okay, so those are my few questions, and I guess if you have answers later, that's great. My comments, so
Excuse me, we can answer that
Okay,
one. It's
all
the
right.
Metro West area.
It's basically of the Boston metropolitan area.
Boston Metro, so not necessarily Metro West, it's really the whole Boston area.
Yes.
Okay, so that, okay. So I understand right? There's a mandate, we have to do this. What I don't agree with is the over compliance part of it. I think we should take our time and just see how things evolve. Like we could keep our plan of neighborhood and keep that aside, and in 5 years come back and say, hey, how have things changed? How are other towns doing? You know, how is this changing were our projections correct? Because a lot of these things depend on assumptions. If assumptions are wrong, then everything changes, right? Even from your base plan to your neighborhood plan, the likely development is 3 times higher on the neighborhood, right? If I recall what you put on the screen, that's 3 times more is a lot, right? But one little assumption could change that, and it's a lot more or it's a lot less. I don't know. Like there's no need to rush, I guess is my point. We can pass what's needed and in a number of years revisit and see how things are going. So that's my point. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do we have anyone online? Oh, okay. So I'm going to call you. Already.
No. He's got it. Clearly not, clearly underqualified or something.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rena. I live at 419 Webster Street. I'm a senior at Needham High School, and I'm co-president of the Social and Political Activism Club, and these are also members of that club. So me and my peers have been working really hard for about the past year to advocate for housing and zoning reform throughout Needham. And we all agree that adopting the neighborhood housing plan over the base plan would be a major step in the right direction. There's 6 of us here today, but there are many more students at Needham High School who are passionate about the same thing. We want to live in a town that welcomes diversity, and we can't expect to bring in younger families and healthcare workers, teachers, and small business owners without diversifying and broadening our town zoning. I know that Needham has the resources to expand our schools if need be, and renovations are going to happen either way at some point. So as a student, considering the data that you've shared with us, I'm not worried about our schools. On behalf of everyone involved at Needham High School, I want to thank all of you for working so hard on these plans. We have something laid out that is such a great opportunity, and I think that we should take that opportunity and use the potential that we have here. If we can't commit to more than just a base plan regarding an issue as important as zoning and housing in our town, we're allowing for so much more apathy towards this important issue. And we've been putting this off for so long already. So I urge everyone to support the full neighborhood housing plan for your kids and your grandkids and their peers and for all of our futures. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, are you speaking also, all 3 of you? Oh, okay.
I'm Sarah Wilson. I live at 21 Oak Hill Road. So basically, pretty much I agree with everything that Rena said, but also I wanted to add that and reiterate kind of what you said about, like, I understand a lot of people's worries about, over compliance, and I understand it. I mean, it's really jarring, but this is just zoning. Well, not just zoning, but this is zoning. This is the legal part of it. It's not actually like what is going to happen. We don't know exactly what is going to happen. We have projections. So I would urge everybody to try and push for the most that we can do, because this process takes so long to change a zone. It takes forever. We've been doing it for so long. So I understand people's worries about, like, trying to do it steadily, but if we push for more now, then we won't have to redo all of this later.
I'll make this one quick, I promise. My name is Matt Schusterman. I live at 28 Blacksmith Drive. And I just wanted to talk about a little bit of my personal experience. Of course, I agree with what Sarah and Rena said earlier. back them with whatever they say. And also, I just wanted to talk about how much opportunity Needham offers. My dad, he grew up here. My uncle owns a business here, Chestnut Dental, and we've had a lot of opportunity with that. But my mom comes from a military family that was working class from Rhode Island. And especially as a senior going through this whole college process, she has repeated the time and time again, just the opportunity that I gained from just being a student at Needham and just how much doors are just completely open, which other path I want to go on and what I want to do is just like my dreams are just at my disposal. And I just need to use my privilege, just help open up that door for many other kids, because so many other kids and people are just born to this world with an inherent disadvantage from socioeconomic situation and other factors like that. Just being able to open up Needham to as many people as we can. Obviously, small business owners can help raise the economy of Needham and also just bring a new diverse experience. I mean, just think about how much you love Needham, how much you love the people around you, and how much the community supports us. And we can just bring that to so many other people who don't have that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have someone online, I believe, Joe Matthews. Justin is supersized right now, but Joe Matthews will join him in a second.
You might want to turn off your video there, Justin.
Artie.
Hello.
It's good to see you.
It is good to see you.
Okay, so Joe Matthews, 31 Rosemary Street. I am also a town meeting member for Precinct I. And yeah, overall, I'm generally supportive of these efforts. I do consider myself a housing hawk, I guess you could say, and I support measures to improve housing affordability. I think the town has moved a little too slowly on these issues, and I am not overly concerned with the additional students, traffic, and I share, or at least I agree with the analysis presented by the assistant town manager that this will be a net financial gain for the town. But I want to raise concern over one specific part of the zoning, which was already shared by Ms. Herman, and that is regarding 100 West, or the Avery Square Business Multifamily District. And my main problem with this is the rezoning for the special permit was done after the conclusion of the homework. It was written by the lawyers for the owner of the parcel. There really wasn't sufficient public hearings or outreach, due diligence, and we didn't get anything additional that or use our leverage to secure any additional guarantees or timeline. And really, there's just not enough justification for making this change to the special permit at this time, because there's nothing to do with the MBTA community's compliance. I'm completely open to reaching some kind of agreement in the future, but there's no reason it needs to be rushed at this point. I mean, the town has done everything requested of it regarding this parcel and more. And the real reason why there hasn't been any development here and nothing has occurred is because the owner has had no incentive to move forward as long as they knew that they could get more permissive zoning by asking for it at a later date. Right, the minute it became clear that this was on the table, right, and this rezoning would, by the special permit, would represent an additional 120,000 square feet of building space and additional design relief relative to the current special permit, they had no reason to move forward. Not because it's not economically viable, as has been suggested, which I have heard from both planning and select board members. I mean, as of December 2022, the owner said it was able to move forward with a memory care and senior living facility under the current zoning regulations, with an additional 1.9 million donation to the town to spare. So I don't really know what has changed since that time, other than the fact that they realized they could get a much bigger project simply by waiting and withholding information from the town. And I really just want to know, what was the point of all the work in public hearings before on this parcel if in the end the lawyers for them were just going to be writing all the zoning. So I would suggest, as a compromise here, that the zoning for this subdistrict under the base and neighborhood plans as regarding to a special permit simply be what was proposed back in April 2024. Then any additional special permit language that's been requested by the owner, which is Welltower, a very large REIT with tons and tons of money and plenty of lawyers at their disposal, can be proposed as a separate article. There's nothing stopping that from happening, and we can vote on it and debate its merits separately. And I really want to see new housing and more projects in this town. I really want to vote in favor of the neighborhood plan, but I just can't support it if this specific line, this specific special permit rework is included. So let's separate this and find a workable solution for May 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Okay, anyone else?
Down lower.
Take it off.
Yes, yes.
Somewhere. Thank you, Jeff Engler from 100 Valley Road in Needham. I appreciate everybody, all the time, all the dedication, all the meetings. My background, I go to a lot of public hearings. I know it's a lot of long nights. I know it's challenging. By way of background, I'm an affordable housing developer. I've been involved in the development of over 10,000 units of housing in Massachusetts. So I live and breathe what we're discussing here tonight. I wish there was something far more aggressive than the neighborhood housing plan. So by default, I'm very supportive of that because that's as aggressive as what we have to vote on. For many of the people in the audience that have some concern about I think the number of units that's shown within the rezoning is greatly misleading when it shows 3,000 units under the neighborhood plan. The likelihood that gets developed is so remote. I will bet anybody in here a dinner at Sweet Basil that even if that is passed, in 5 years we'll be sitting here saying, oh my God, you know, we were so well intentioned and so little has been done under this plan, because it is so hard to do development. And why people that are not developers see this height and density and parking as scary, believe me, as a developer, the enticements aren't that great. So you're not going to have a lot of private developers coming in to do development here because the parameters are not that aggressive. Moreover, many of the sites that exist already are highly functioning commercial buildings that a developer could not come in and buy out because they could not pay what that is currently worth. Moreover, there's lots of very small parcels that don't lend themselves to multifamily development. So people that are worried about Needham turning into Assembly Square or Cambridge or the Seaport, that's not going to happen. It's just not. Moreover, people that sincerely care about providing housing for seniors, providing housing for empty nesters, providing housing for young professionals. This is what this is about. Needham is already good at providing family housing. I'm always amused when people talk about fiscal impacts as it relates to multifamily housing. We have 6 new houses in my neighborhood. Those 6 houses alone have 13 school-age kids. All right, all the tear downs that you see in Needham, which are allowed by right, those are the developments that are generating the school-age children, not the 1 and 2 bedroom market or affordable housing that this plan proposed, not to mention senior housing, which may or may not be built, generates 0 kids. So I would suggest, and I do a lot of this for my own developments, the fiscal impacts I think are what is shown, I think, are actually less than what will be developed. So with that said, I'm very supportive of the neighborhood plan. I think it'll be great for Needham for all sorts of different reasons. I think for those that are civic-minded, and to the gentleman who spoke earlier, I think the time is now. This state has a housing crisis. Needham has a housing crisis. Young people are leaving the state. Businesses are starting to feel the impact of not being able to provide credible housing for the workforce. So I think Needham has a responsibility, just like every other municipality in the Commonwealth, to provide housing of this nature. That's not the $2 and $3 and $4 million houses that we're already developing in Needham quite successfully, I might add. So I implore people here tonight, the planning board and others involved, to support the neighborhood plan. Thank you.
Thank you. This woman.
Thank you. Carol Pady, 32 Linden Street. I'm speaking briefly tonight as the president of the League of Women Voters of Needham. Our board has not had the chance to meet since these zoning proposals were finalized, and therefore we have not voted on supporting the final articles, but we have previously endorsed the 2022 Town of Needham Housing Plan. And as we stated then, our past studies have resulted in us reaching consensus to support increasing the amount of affordable housing in Needham. These proposals do in fact allow Needham to have more affordable housing, and they would ensure that at least 1 in 8 housing units constructed would be for residents that do not exceed certain income levels. Further, we fully endorsed the draft housing plan back in 2022, a key component of which was to comply with the then newly enacted state law requiring towns with MBTA services to create zoning districts that facilitated the construction of more multifamily housing. So these positions remain part of our views. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts on these important articles and for the work that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Alex, do we have anyone online? Okay, so the next one. Yeah. It's Colleen. That's how your hand up. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Shaler, 24 Avon Circle, but I speak for the Needham Council on Aging Board of Directors. I'm the chair of that board, and we have supported this whole process and continue to do so. The housing need of seniors is incredible. We're not, and I'll never make it. Those houses aren't going to be done, you know, for us, but there are upcoming seniors that are going to need to be able to stay in this town, and this plan is going to help them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ellen? Okay. The gentleman in the blue.
Good evening. My name is Max Wolf, and I'm with the Charles River Regional Chamber. We emphatically support the neighborhood housing plan. This plan unlocks downtown Needham's potential while providing for the development of the housing stock that our businesses desperately need. With 3 commuter rail stations, parks, and walkable streets, downtown Needham has the bones to be a thriving center for economic development. One obstacle holding it back from its full potential is the lack of multifamily housing. Multifamily that is needed for Needham seniors and their caregivers, as well as teachers, firefighters, and restaurant workers. According to many of our small businesses, the lack of housing is an impediment to the ability to hire and retain workers, which directly correlates to their ability to succeed in Needham. Quite simply, many employees or potential employees cannot afford to live in Needham or anywhere close. This shortage affects not only long wait times for tables at your favorite restaurant, but also waits for medical appointments and the emergency room. More multifamily development will provide great workforce housing to staff these businesses and reduce traffic generated by workers with long commutes. Multifamily development will also increase the foot traffic in the downtown area, helping to attract and retain restaurants and retailers. Both plans do not mandate redevelopment or new construction. Rather, they increase the incentives for developing downtown parcels into multifamily housing. This will be a gradual process over decades and will likely never hit the 3,000 plus unit capacity written in the plan. However, the base compliance plan does not offer the same adequate incentives to address these housing challenges. With construction costs and interest rates as high as they are, greater zoning density, like the kind found in the neighborhood housing plan, will be required to make development economically feasible. The neighborhood housing plan brings Needham one step closer to addressing the community's housing challenges. It will unlock opportunities for multifamily housing, revitalize Needham's downtown core, and support its local businesses. We urge the board to move forward with both plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, anyone else? Online? Okay, Jean?
Jean McKnight, 100 Rosemary Way in Needham, and that is the Rosemary Ridge condominium that's been mentioned in the presentation. And I want to touch on two things. One is the need of seniors who want to downsize. And I want to speak from our own experience, myself and my husband, Steve. We had a beautiful home on the corner of May and Garden Street. Our 6 well, at least 4 of our 6 children lived there and went to school in Needham schools. And there came the point where they all had gone off and started their own lives as adults. And it was time for us to sell the house, and we did in 2013. Could we find a place to live in Needham? We wanted to buy a condominium unit for the security of having ownership. There are only 2, and we also wanted the security of looking to the future of having an elevator building. There are only 2 condominiums in Needham with elevator buildings. One is the Avery School and one is Rosemary Ridge Apartments. I mean, Rosemary Ridge Condominium. Lucky us. We stayed in Needham. We moved to what's now Hamilton Highlands, West Webster Green. Very nice apartment building. We like it there very much. But we wanted that condominium unit and we found it at Rosemary Ridge. And we've happily been living there for 10 years. And I want to say something about the statistics about numbers of children. And I remember we presented these statistics at the time of the Muzzy rezoning, and they were really based on data from rental developments in our own town, as I recall, being presented by Marion Cooley at the hearings we had at that time. But let me tell you from my own experience as a resident of Rosemary Ridge, according to the formula, we should have about 12 children in this 105 unit condominium. I have never seen more than 4 children living at Rosemary Ridge. So I think the statistics that are presented about numbers of children per unit, and we have no age restriction, of course, at Rosemary Ridge. Anybody can buy there and live there. So I'm really speaking for people who are at the stage of life where they want to downsize. We started looking at Norwood. We didn't think we'd find anything in Needham. My sister and her husband sold their house about 3 years ago. Where did they go? Norwood. Fortunately, they found a condominium to buy, and it's at the Highlands, and they're very, very happy there. So I know we can't make a developer do a condominium. The courts have said that's not a subject for zoning. It's up to the developer whether it's going to be a rental apartment or a condominium. But both kinds of housing meet local needs, and I especially want to speak for the seniors. I want to speak one more issue. I mean, I've been working on housing and economic development in this town for the past 18 years. I was first appointed to the Needham Center Study Committee back in 2006. Then I was first appointed and then elected to the planning board and served on the planning board for 16 or more years. I also served on the housing plan working group that produced the housing plan that's been referenced in 2023. And then I was so happy to be appointed to the Housing Needham, the Home Advisory Committee. What I want to talk about is the neighborhood plan and how that plan comes out of all this work over these years. Because what did we discover? It was mentioned before. In 2009, we changed the zoning for the Chestnut Street area and the downtown to allow mixed use, residential above commercial. And we had only 2 projects. One is 50 Dedham Ave, and that took advantage of the overlay, so they went up to 4 stories. The other one, more recently, a very nice, very attractive development on Oak Street, took advantage of the base zoning, which allows a mixture of multifamily housing. And they did a condominium of 5 units. But all these years, we expected so much more. We wanted to see the strong economic development where our businesses and our local retail stores, our restaurants, our services will be supported by the people who live in our town. And I hope that this neighborhood housing plan will be a step in that direction. and that it will be successful in producing the kind of housing with commercial that we envision for our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. Any more questions? 1 second, is there anyone online? Okay, so. go ahead.
Hi, it's Mike Fish, 419 Webster Street, Needham Heights. For those who think perhaps that we are not in an emergency situation, I encourage you to visit Trulia and Zillow and your other tools and get a feel for the cost of a small 3-bedroom home in Needham. Get a sense of that. And then start looking around at some of the towns that used to be affordable 10 years ago. Have a look at Waltham, have a look at Walpole, have a look at Norwood. You can look there and those numbers will tell you an important story about what's happening here. And we are not in this alone. So we're not just making a decision for Needham. If all the towns near us and nearby us all say we're going to do the minimum, that our goal is the status quo. And you can read about this in a lot of detail in the Boston Globe. We're not going to address this emergency, which is making it impossible for middle-class people to live in our state. It's a legit emergency. And I think that it is unwise for us to be in an emergency room type of situation and to pretend otherwise. Thanks.
Thank you. No, is there anyone online? One person online. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. Anne, are you with it? I see Justin again. But we're waiting for Anne.
Do you want me to go? I see it, but do you want me to go?
I can see myself.
Okay, Anne, can you please say your name and your address, and maybe that'll push Justin out of the.
Okay, so
screen.
my name's Ann Hike, and I live at 116 Maple Street.
Great.
Can you see me now?
Hi, Anne.
Hi. I just wanted to rebound off of Jean McKnight's comment in talking from personal experience too. My husband and I, when we were young, we bought a condo in France because that's where we were living, but it provided us the opportunity to build equity, and the houses in Needham are so expensive that I think having condominium apartments in Needham is also a really good solution for first-time real estate purchasers, including young people. So I just wanted to add that to her comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Okay, anyone else? Yes.
Bob Smart, Precinct G, well, force of habit, 25 Mayo Ave. I served on the planning board, as a peer know, for a number of years, and I was involved with several efforts to rezone various business districts in town with the idea of trying to promote redevelopment across 128, the NEBC district and the mixed use 128 and the Highland Commercial. I was also involved a little bit later with efforts to try to promote redevelopment along Lower Chestnut Street and in the Center Business District. And we on the planning board, I think, were fairly careful about what we proposed, and in town meeting went along with those changes. The problem is that there was almost no response from the property owners and the developers. So we didn't get anywhere close to the redevelopment that we were looking for. Now, I'm convinced, that Greater Boston in particular needs a lot more housing developed than we have. There's a huge shortage. And I think Needham ought to do its part to try to help with that and not simply say, well, that's for other towns to take care of. I think we ought to be doing some of it ourselves. I think that the base plan, it's compliant with the state law, but I don't think it's going to result in very much housing production. So I'm very supportive of the neighborhood plan. The increases, the density and dimensional changes, which are just a modest step beyond what's in the base plan, can actually make a difference as to whether properties get redeveloped or they don't get redeveloped. I guess finally, so I support the neighborhood plan. Finally, there's just a cleanup item. I had some, and I think I've written about this, but I had some difficulty myself in figuring out exactly what the changes were for the neighborhood plan, both the zoning article itself and also the map article. And I would encourage you, because what you have to do is you have to toggle back and forth, between the original articles, the base plan articles, and the amendments. And it's hard to do that. So I would encourage you to put those together so that the town meeting members are going to have clean neighborhood plan articles to look at. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Appreciate it. Is anyone online? No. Anyone else here? Oh, 1 second. Who is that? Alex, besides Justin again.
I thought I keep my camera on as I'm a member of the board, but whatever, that's fine. I'm here.
Is anyone joining us?
I see Jill, so she may want to talk.
Okay, thank you.
Do you see me? Yes?
Yes.
We would like to, but.
Oh, you don't?
I don't know what they do in the.
I think it's the view
product.
gallery.
Well, I unmuted.
So we see you. We see you.
On, so you see me now?
Yeah, we see you now.
Okay. So I'm Jill Kahn. I'm a 26-year town meeting member. I'm old and I live on Brookline Street. And I just had a comment, which is about when you were speaking about trying to bring in people who are in the workforce and who would be earning 80 to 120% of the area median income, which for one person in Norfolk County, I believe it doesn't go by Metro Boston from what I understand, the way somebody said it was Metro Boston, but I believe it's by county. So given that we are in Norfolk County, 80% for one person is 91,400. And the 120% is 137,100. So to me, this seems pretty high as far as we are speaking about trying to bring in young people and seniors and people who might work in the town and trying to encourage more diversity rather than just having to be upper middle class, which seems to be the case now, unless you bought 30 years ago, as I did. So I think those numbers should be lowered. I think that if we're trying to encourage workforce citizens here who are going to be new Needhamites, I think that those numbers should be more like 60% of area median income to 100 rather than 80 to 120. 60% for one person is 68,550. And 100% is 114,250. So I would like to hear what the planning board thinks about lowering those numbers, because 80% is 91,400 for one, and 120% is 137,100. And that seems to me that it wouldn't achieve getting this diverse workforce and of young people and of workers in the town, unless I'm really mistaken about what an average worker makes, or maybe I'm very underpaid in my full-time job. I don't know.
Well, thank you, Jill.
So do you have some input on those numbers, or would you be open to lowering the percentage to encourage younger people?
We're not here to, yeah, we can't answer those questions right now, but we will, but we're taking everything down right now. So thank you for your comment.
You're welcome.
Understood. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, respected planning board, for your leadership and all your hard work. Gary Ajavian, Meeting House Circle, Precinct F, also a town meeting member. And I had proposed back in May an article to, we found out that the town was not doing an engineering infrastructure study to uncover whether or not our single-family built infrastructure would in fact support all of this housing. Just to go back for a quick history lesson, my dad bought a house in Needham back in 1957. And to him, and he tells the story, he told the story when he was alive, it was not affordable. He had two jobs. He had a day job, a night job, and my mom worked as well in order to support that house. So the story that I had heard from being a young person was that Needham was not affordable back then. In my 20s, I left Needham and wanted to come back in, could not find a house to move into. And I, again, bought a house that was not affordable and worked several jobs to be able to get back into Needham. So, I mean, the statement that Needham is not affordable, I believe that Needham has always been a high demand town. It's located in a perfect spot. If you look at, Metro West, you look at the East Coast, and many people say, oh, great, you live in Needham. Wow, that's a great place to be. So supply and demand, the demand is high, and that's driven up costs. But we all want more housing, and we'd love to have it in Needham. So back in May, we asked for the facts. Let's get the data. Let's find out what will it cost to approve all of this kind of zoning that many people want. And the answer was from town meeting, pretty much a stonewall. They did not want to find out what the engineering study would show. They did not want to do a third-party engineering study. They did not want an independent peer review. And we were quite shocked. There were a number of people that, after I brought the article forward, that then supported that case. So still looking at the history of Needham, quick history lesson for the young folks that are here that are very enthusiastic about housing. Needham is Needham because it's never voted for projects, large projects, anything of this scope, without factual information, without doing studies. And they not only do the study for the project so that then town meeting can have the information to vote, they also require studies for other effects that the project could have. And in this case, it would be schools or portable classrooms or other impacts that the project would have. And that has not been done here. And there is a lot of critical missing information that many people are concerned about. That missing information could in fact lead to unintended consequences, unintended costs that could make Needham even less affordable, with a surprising escalation in taxes that no one really seems to want to talk about. So again, we all want more housing, but the thought process is
that we need to move carefully. We need to be considering what will this cost us to vote this in. In order to make an informed vote, we need that information. Will our pipes support this? Will we end up seeing all the roads in Needham dug up? We know that every infrastructure has limits, and Needham was designed and built as a single-family town. The other point that I'd like to make, and I think this is reverberating across the state. I know there are cities and towns that have complied with the zoning, but that does not offset the fact that there are legal challenges with respect to these regulations today. And these could be very strong. They could have strong merit to these legal arguments. And rushing headlong into this thing, understanding we all want more housing, it makes no sense to race towards an artificially imposed deadline. In fact, the deadline for Needham is December 31st. It's not October 21st. And it's just something that we should not do. The town fathers that came before us, I'm fairly new to town meeting, and my hat's off to all the many people that actually shaped the zoning in Needham, that created the Needham that is now Needham. And you all are doing a wonderful job of doing the same. In fact, I heard part of one of your meetings where you debated the topic of the unrestricted number of bedrooms per unit, the unrestricted number of occupants per unit, and the fact that the state has asked you to rewrite the zoning regulations that restrict occupants. And one of the comments from couple of the respected members here, and thank you for that, was that, is this going to be a rooming house? Why is the state requiring this? We want to encourage families to move into Needham. Needham is a great place to raise children. I raise my children here. But why are we doing this? And the state did not answer, from what I recall, the state did not answer that question thoroughly. And even the attorney, our town attorney, could not explain why they're allowing basically a rooming house type of zoning. So I'm just asking
So,
everyone
Mr.
to
Damian, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I've let you speak for twice the amount because I let Jean speak for twice the amount, but we need to wrap it up right now, please.
Thank you. I don't want to go over Jean's time. Absolutely. So I would just ask that we pause, we look at this thing, and we get the information. We don't rush towards this, and we think it through for the sake of the future of Needham and the future of our children and the future of our grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me call on Josh first. Thank you. Oh, there's someone online? Okay, hold on one second, Josh. Eileen, are you online?
Hi, yes, Eileen Scanlon, 48 Dartmouth Ave. And I support the idea of going slowly, and I think the base plan, the name of it could be the compliance plan instead of the base plan. And I am concerned about moving slowly, and it's not because I'm anti-housing. I just think that it's built on a lot of assumptions, and I think we should really challenge those assumptions and make sure that we're not overreaching in this process. But so I support the speaker who went right before me. But I also wanted to ask a question about the procedure. And one of the questions is, are the articles set in stone, or could the components, for example, of the neighborhood plan be broken down into the different sections, as in like the different slides that you showed at the beginning, so that it doesn't only have to be 4 articles that are being voted on, it could be many more where people would actually have, it's not an all or nothing approach. And I also would love to understand sort of what the procedure is from here and who has the authority to, with the vote. I assume it's town meeting. But if you could explain the procedure, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Eileen.
Sure. So the procedure is that when this hearing is closed, the planning board will take into consideration the comments that received this evening, and will make a decision on whether it wants to go forward, what its recommendation is going to be on the articles, and any changes it wants to make to those articles. And those articles will be revised, and they'll be placed basically on the warrant in that revised form. And then those articles will go to town meeting for a vote by town meeting on October the 21st.
Okay, thank you.
Timeline for when it needs to be, when we plan to do that and when it needs to be
Oh,
done.
so the
to
planning
answer
board,
question.
the planning board has a meeting scheduled, I think, for the 17th and the 24th of this month, at which time these articles will be discussed and a final decision made.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And Josh, you are next.
Thank you. Joshua Levy, 1606 Great Plain Ave. I speak only for myself. I remember from my time on home that there was a lot of discussion about the dimensional regulations and geography. I want to talk about actually the site plan process, which from my recollection wasn't discussed as much during home. I understand that the town's under no obligation to pay for any infrastructure improvements associated with any development. From my reading of the site plan review process, the developer is not under no obligation to do that either. So I would actually make a suggestion that the site plan review process include language that's already in the site plan review process zoning bylaw for other developments outside of this. So this is in section 7.4.6. And specifically, I brought too many things, I'm sorry. 7.4.6F. So that language says mitigation of adverse impacts on the town's resources, including the effects on the town's water supply and distribution system, sewer collection and treatment, fire protection and streets. So by including that in the site plan review criteria, the planning board could condition improvements at the expense of the developer. Or even if it doesn't, if it's part of the review criteria, then at least we'll know in advance before the permitting what infrastructure improvements are required by the town. I think it's better to know in advance. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. No, we can discuss it at the planning board meeting.
Thank you. Henry Reagan, 25 Bennington Street. I know it's getting late, but I'm wondering if we could go back to the slide. I think it was page 27, which showed the build out, the likely build out, what would be totally possible, what was likely to be built out. I'll make the point, and then if there comes, I'm sorry to take the time. I think it's important to know the timeline that's involved in this, in the likely build out. How many years was that figured? Is that figured over the next? I know I don't mean to be facetious. The next 12 months or the next 12 years? Because I do think that seeing the number scares people. And when presented to town meeting, I'm supporting the neighborhood housing plan, and I think that when you see that what's likely to be built out compared to what can be built out, there's a big difference. And when it's done over a period of time, I think it makes it even less of a scary impact. Second thing I wanted to mention is that I am a little concerned about the assumption that's made in terms of schools that the voters of Needham are going to vote for I think it's a $300 million Pollard and a $70 million Mitchell. And I don't think I think it's a small, about $500,000 at High Rock. What would the effect be? I mean, this is a question that we're likely to get. What will the effect be if those referenda aren't passed by the town? And I don't know if that's possible to do or not. And finally, people have talked about this will change Needham. My answer is good. It's a good town. It's a good place to live. I bought 2 houses here. I'm glad to live here, raise kids here, all the same stuff, but there's nothing wrong with changing it either. And by changing it, as Jill mentioned, with more diversity, more people of different incomes and different backgrounds, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And I thank you for your time and for your hard work, and Heidi, for yours as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Holly?
Hi, I'm Holly Clark. I live at 1652 Central Avenue. I am a town meeting member from Precinct D. And I have spent a lot of time living between understanding the difference between special permit and site plan review over the last couple of years. And so I wanted to talk about that in particular for here, because I think the devil is in the details of how to manage this. So I think housing is really important. I have appreciated the work done by the original housing committee that came up with our housing goals. But it is really important for the town to maintain the ability to control the projects that actually come in here. And that is not in conflict with housing. And I heard the consultant say the way to deal with the fact that these have to be provided as of right is to take your concerns that were in your special permitting, which for us is major site plan, special permit, and put them in the site plan review for these projects. So you take the criteria that were what the town has already designated as what we want to concern ourselves with, and make that in the site plan review for these sections. So I was surprised when I looked at the draft for site plan review of these projects that we did not do that. So for example, in section 7.5.2, which is our special permitting, we have a condition, or we have a criteria that allows the planning board to set limitations on the construction process. So it doesn't have anything to do with what you ultimately build. You can build the biggest thing permitted under zoning, but the planning board can say, because of these factors, we're going to require a construction management plan. Most developers are fine with it. If you have one that isn't, I would just step back and say, I also think the zoning bylaws are meant for the most recalcitrant developer. It's not, this is a great plan, we're all in it together. Developers are there to make money. And so they will push. And it is incumbent on the planning board to have the tools just to protect the town. So for example, particularly here where we're saying we're going to build along the densest areas, we might want to say, you can't do it on Saturdays and Sundays. You're right next to the small businesses that we're so concerned about. And so for these projects, you're not going to be able to do it on Saturdays and Sundays, because right now you're only constrained by the noise bylaw. So it's from 7 to 8, you can construct 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So that's just like one example of something that maybe just got missed, but it concerns me that it's not in there. And I actually did speak to a planning department in a neighboring town, and they actually are doing exactly what the consultant said here. They are taking the conditions they had in their special permitting section, just labeling it as site plan review here. They've gotten approval from the Attorney General's office to do it that way. So this isn't, it shouldn't be a roadblock. And it's just, I think that's really important. I also think when we talk about going to the design, and I'm sorry, this is boring and technical, and it's not, I moved here and my kids and I love it and all of that. I do, all of that thing is true. But I do think that this kind of detail work is so important. There is a piece, like the projects will be reviewed by the design review board. The design review board, the applicant gets to go there. I think it would be really helpful to explicitly say that the abutters or neighbors can also go to the design review board and raise their concerns there. If there are some, they may go and say, we think this is a great project. They may go and say, this is the thing that concerns me. And the earlier we find out about the concerns, the quicker they can be addressed and they can get worked out. I think ZBA members have commented at various hearings about when developers work with neighbors, it's the best thing they ever hear. So since we're talking about changing these things, we could build in some better approaches. I also noticed again that there's not,
Holly, you're in.
Okay,
You're almost
fine.
at Jean's
I'm
time.
done.
and we
Okay,
need to-
I don't want to get, I understand that. But I will say the other thing that concerns me here is there have been a bunch of assumptions and I wonder about them. Like when we're talking about school capacity, are we talking about maximum capacity? Or are we talking about the preferred operational capacity, which should only be 80% of what you could do? And when we're saying, well, this won't get built, are we considering the fact that last month the state passed a law making a lot more money available to encourage housing? Where does that fit in here? And I do think we have to think carefully. This is a brand new law, and we can stand here and say they're not going to make us pay for the infrastructure, and we may find out in a year that that's not true, that all got changed. So I think it's important to be prudent, and we could, of course, do the base plan and say we're going to do the neighborhood plan under our own bylaws and have special permitting and be able to control the whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Hi, my name's Ken Buckley. I really messed this up already. I live at 221 Warren Street, Precinct G. Hi. I just want to say I thank you. I know everybody has worked very hard. I agree with many of the previous speakers. I think that we all really love the town. I think we all want to see more housing. I think where my concerns lie is the fact that the MBTA Communities Act is a simple 3-paragraph law that exploded into 26 pages of guidelines by an unelectable set of boards at the state. And we're now trying to comply with something that was actually kind of invented or given to bureaucracy to then create. And so we're trying to fit that. We're trying to fit into that because we believe in more housing. But the fact is that a lot of this housing is by guidelines not meant to be affordable in the sense, I think, of how a number of people think about affordability. Smaller houses, condominiums, things that are quote unquote truly affordable in terms of a small house or a condo that might be in a complex that is below $1 million each, or maybe even below $700,000 each. Wouldn't that be something? So we're kind of stuck in a place where we're trying to comply with something that in actuality in our hearts isn't what we're trying to get done, because the guidelines say that you can do a site plan review, but you can't stop it. You can do you can say, hey, we don't have to do any infrastructure, but the guidelines actually say that if you actually have an infrastructure problem, well, we're just going to assume the developer is going to shrink the project, or we're going to assume the town's going to invest in it, and maybe you'll get some money from the Commonwealth. I mean, that's what the guidelines say. And so why are we taking the heart and the spirit of Needham, which produces all the affordable developments we have now, and actually do that instead of trying to comply with a law that really is a developer's dream, because we're going to make all these things large so that we can produce a lot of units that they can develop a lot of rent from, that the rent will keep going up over time. I don't think that fits what the spirit of the high school students wanted, what the earlier speakers talk about affordability. I don't believe that that's actually what a lot of people that are for this, I don't think they understand what will actually happen. Maybe we won't get all of the development we want, but then again, I don't think we'll get the affordability we want either. And so I think we really should just delay this vote. I don't think it will do the town justice in terms of what everybody wants. And I think we will wind up with an infrastructure problem. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becker.
Right, good evening. I'm David Rushka. I live at 21 Rosemary Street. My husband and I moved to Needham in 2020, and we often remark to each other how lucky we were to be able to move here when we did. Unfortunately, housing opportunities are becoming increasingly out of reach, especially for younger generations, not just in Needham, but the entire Boston metropolitan area. We are literally pushing our future out of the state. The MBTA Communities Act recognizes that this regional problem requires a regional solution where each community does its small part to help us all in the long run. The neighborhood housing plan proposes modest, thoughtful zoning changes that will create opportunities for desperately needed housing. And crucially, the neighborhood housing plan creates opportunities for housing that is near transit. More and more, I see younger folks embracing the liberation of a car-free or a car-light lifestyle. Living in Needham Heights, my husband and I easily get around with one automobile, but 2 bicycles and 4 legs. I have friends and coworkers in the area who happily forego car ownership. Supporting housing in walkable areas of town with convenient access to transport and local businesses is exactly what we need. In summary, minimized impacts on the town, support for local businesses, more housing creation opportunities. The neighborhood housing plan supports our continued vitality. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. There's the woman in the back and then.
Am I coming through?
Yes.
I'm Ann Fox. I live on Edgewater Drive, and I grew up in Needham and have always lived here. When my parents bought the house in Needham, they wanted to be in West Roxbury so that their kids could go to Latin schools, but they couldn't afford West Roxbury, so they came to Needham. Well, when I was growing up, the M towns, Millis, Medway, all of those, they were the end of the world. They now are people who grew up in Needham are living there, and the schools are improving because those people are working on it. The Worcester area was the pits. Now Boston is dying and Worcester is flourishing. There's a lot of things you can't quite fine tune, particularly from the state level. But I was going to talk mostly about education, but I noticed that transparency is a word that I keep hearing coming up here. We're talking about the number of students. It was 8 per 100 households. Now it's like 13 according to this. Well, the average in Needham is 50, as you know, but it said studio apartments, 1 bedroom, and so on. The way I read this law, you have to have at least 2 bedrooms because you cannot exclude children and you cannot make it specifically senior housing. So all of that stuff doesn't really apply until you get up to the 2 bedrooms. When you showed us what these things would bring in if they were partly built and totally built, and they look like wonderful numbers, and you said, and that will cover the expenses. Well, we don't know what those expenses are, and we don't know who knows. So I think that the lack of transparency and the questions that are coming up now that should have come up right in the beginning, and I'm not saying it's anybody's fault, you people have worked so hard on this, but I think what's happening again is we're being rushed into something where when things are still coming up and questions are still coming up now, we're not really ready to go on board with this. And as someone pointed out, there are legal cases going on. So we have coverage, you know, I mean, you can always wait to see how the legal case turns out. But as I say, transparency is something that I'm really concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a gentleman in the back with the green. Yeah, and then the woman here.
Hey, Gary Petrie from 60 Dana Place.
What was your
Yeah,
name?
can you
What was
say
your
it
Gary,
again?
Gary
Gary.
Petrie. Kudos to that man back there who has got one car, but I think he's in the vast minority of people. And as it relates to 100 West Street, was it 187 minimum units is what's being proposed? Is that
Originally, it's 243 now.
243?
Yeah.
Which would mean one car per?
Minimum one car.
So 243 cars. But again, I don't know, except for him, I don't know
43 parking spaces.
sparse parking spaces.
Who
So,
knows whether people who actually move in there will have one car per unit? We don't-
right, well, I'm assuming that most of those people that are going to live there are going to have more than one car. I'm just guessing, right? Because hardly anybody has one car. Any family has got one car.
Excuse me, could you speak up a little bit?
Oh,
please?
sorry.
Thank you.
I'm assuming that everybody's going to have two cars because most everybody has two cars. So if they only have one place, where are they going to park their extra cars? There's no on-street parking in Needham, right? So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that maybe that 243 units might be a little bit too high. That it should maybe be lowered to facilitate that space. It may just be a little bit too aggressive, and that's all.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much, Gary. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. I'm Christine Urban. I live on Webster Street, Precinct D. Out of force of habit, whenever I talk about data, I brought slides. It's natural. As soon as she cues me up. What I'd like to talk about today, you have to go back to the beginning.
And we've received them
There you
this
go.
afternoon. That we'll talk about it in the correspondence. We received your slides this
Oh,
afternoon.
good, okay. What I'd like to talk about is one of the things that I also think deserves further study. Because right now, the school assumptions are a little shaky based on the math that I've done on them. And I just want to show you kind of where I'm going with this. The school assumptions, Katie covered this very well. There's a lot of changes between the original RKG numbers and the ones we're using now, which I'm sure, you covered all of these major points. But the one thing that hasn't happened is a real in-depth analysis of what's going on with these school numbers. There's lots of opinions, but I think what I did with this is I took the new numbers, the ones that were just published, and ran them through to do more of an analysis of what's going on. So, and my focus here is not on the concept of zoning, it's on the price of zoning, because that's what we come down to. Student enrollment is the biggest issue, I think, on the table, because it's the most immediate consequence of occupancy. It drives spending by the head because there are new costs for each student. It could exacerbate existing problems. And it also impacts a key element of Needham's brand. I mean, people come here in order to put their kids into our schools. So what I'd like to do is just ask 4 basic questions of the group as well as the board. Number 1, how many kids really live in apartments? Okay. The assumptions that RKG used, even with the change in the 2-bedroom unit from 600th of a kid to 16, is it realistic for us to just assume there are no kids in a 1-bedroom apartment? I mean, there are a lot of single families, single parents that have 1 or 2 kids in a single bedroom apartment, especially at the kind of costs that we're talking about for these apartments, right? Even the 3-bedroom apartments only assume half a kid. A 3-bedroom apartment going for $5,000 a month is a lot of money to pay, and there's nobody occupying that. So I looked at the realism of just the initial assumption that goes into the model. Okay, the original RKG number is what gave us the 8 students per 100 households. The new RKG number gives us 13 students per 100 households. I still think that's too low. So what's a realistic student projection? Okay. We all know that currently Needham is at 49 students per 100, and the other towns with top rated schools are at 50, 54, and so forth. Those are not going to be replicated in multifamily housing. That's the current reality. That is not the future reality. But a very important source, ESI residential demographic multiplier, a real mouthful, that everybody uses. McKibben uses it, RKG uses it, everybody uses it, says that 29, this is for multifamily housing, 29 per 100 is a reasonable number, okay? If you go only to dense housing, ESI says 18 per 100. Our own Needham report from 2025 projected 17 per 100. The city of Boston, which is 65% multifamily, says 17 per 100. What worries me is that both the old and the new RKG projections are so far out of range of what all the other sources are saying. The other thing that concerns me is that, yes, if you look at, I'll skip the old RKG numbers, okay? Just go to the new
Christine,
ones.
we need you to start wrapping it up. because
Oh, I'm sorry.
we're way beyond.
Okay, the bottom line on this is that the new numbers at 13 per 100 make sense. But if they're off by 6 kids at 19 students per 100, those numbers go negative. The fiscal impact of 6 kids switches over all that positive rosy glow into a negative that we're going to be paying taxes for. And so if you look at when we start paying, those negative numbers are right in the range, the top range of where we're going. And, oops. And the yellow bar there is what I would consider to be a testable range. What happens at 17, 18, 19, or even 29? That's the range we should be playing with, not 13. 13 is too low. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone online? Anyone here? Back in the back? Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Fred Sewell, 1554 Central Avenue in Needham. I want to thank this board and all the other people in Needham who have spent so much time working on this proposal and trying to comply with the MBTA Communities Act. But we're now being asked to approve proposed rezoning plans at town meeting, while those are charged with implementing them are still searching for facts and figures and data, which was, the former speaker just demonstrated that we need more information, that the information is all not been collected and collated and digested yet. And that's obvious by the fact that your consultant just this week turned in new data. So based on that, and given the enormity of the risk and the dire and irreversible consequences of bad choices, I have a simple question today. And that is why, and that's not for this board necessarily, but why are we rushing forward headlong into making these decisions by in the middle of October, when we don't even know that the law, which is forcing us to do this, is constitutional? We all know that the Supreme Judicial Court has agreed to take up the charge in the Milton case and Andrea Campbell's case, and have an answer for us sometime in October or this fall. And we have until December 21st or 31st, whatever, to comply with the law. So given the ramifications of implementing things and voting things in now, prior to knowing if the law is even legal, why are we doing that? Why are we, with all the challenges and all the uncertainties and irreversible consequences attendant to it, why are we in such a hurry to get through this? So my recommendation and my statements here tonight is simply just to express my concern, not with any of the work that's been done, but the fact that we don't know enough yet. And once we comply with this act, which again, we don't know if it's constitutional or not, there's class action suits also being filed against, along with Andrea Campbell's suit in the Milton case. Why don't we wait to approve this if we have to? Otherwise, we can do the zoning that we want to do as Needhamites without state interference, without a state mandate, without being told what we have to do in Needham, our town. Once it's done, it's done. There's no going back on that. Once there's no reason to rush, is what I'm saying.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes. Alex, there's no one online, right? Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Paula Dickerman, 20 Burnside Road. I'm glad you asked, why not wait? Because there is a housing shortage, a severe housing shortage in Massachusetts. Gary, you talked about history before. Part of the history, are we good? Part of the history of zoning in Massachusetts is that suburbs did a really good job of building houses from the 40s through the 70s and then stopped building multifamily housing. We continued to build single family housing, but not multifamily housing, as a result of which, as the population has grown, the housing stock has not, because we don't have that much land. It's not like we could build lots of new single family housing. So that is why we can't wait. The state says there's a shortage of 200,000 units. That's people. That's people. That's seniors, that's young families, that's workers. So waiting doesn't make sense to me. The other thing is people are raising really good questions. My sense is the people who have been working on this in Needham since 2022 have also asked those questions, and they have analyzed those questions, and they have concluded that the neighborhood housing plan is a reasonable compromise of all of the ideas that they heard from the community about how we can zone to create additional multifamily housing in town. I want to say something about the state implementing this law. They were also slow to implement this law. This crisis of lack of housing was happening for a long time. They tried laws. They tried state mandates. They tried laws like 40B, and we took advantage of those, much to our credit. However, this was a desperate attempt to say, as people have said before, we are all in this together. This is a regional problem. It's not a town problem, although our housing plan tells us it is a problem. We don't have enough housing here. We're not meeting the needs of our residents, let alone people who want to move here. And it is not an affordable housing law. It isn't. Affordable housing takes money. Affordable housing is affordable because it's under market. It is not market. Developers don't make money on affordable housing. It takes subsidies. That's something else we can do. And I bet my time is running out. I have one more thing to say. And that is waiting and waiting for us as a town to take action and do other zoning. I have not seen that in the past. We can say we're going to do it. I don't have a lot of confidence. I think we need to do it now. We should do it and we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula.
Hello, I'm Barbara McDonald. I live on Pickering Street. So first off, I'd like to say that I would like to ask you all to postpone the vote from October 21st until after the SJC has ruled on the legality of this issue. The housing developments in Needham have been carefully thought through. They've been designed and fine-tuned and located to appropriately fit well into our unique suburban town. If you just drive down the main roads today, we can all see the results of that growth. The traffic analysis that just was submitted is very clear that our growth has resulted in multiple intersections with a failing grade of an F. Our town leaders have managed the growth as best they can because of our well thought through and time tested zoning regulations. And the results were good other than the F intersections. Additionally, Needham residents have always been able to participate in and help shape these developments to provide input that has prevented profit-driven developers from overdeveloping our town. So it seems clear that we're willing to race towards removing all of these time-tested regulations and put in place untested state regulations that were written to favor developers and not the residents of Needham. So that's why I'd like to ask again that we postpone the vote until after the SJC has time to rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Alex, is there anyone else? Okay. Anyone else? Oscar.
Nothing more than my ugly face.
Oscar Mertz, Rybury Hillway. It's been a pleasure to hear this conversation, and I am greatly, let's say, encouraged by the fact that we have all of this community input. And we've also seen a great deal of work done by the committees, some of which I was lucky to be a part of when we were developing the housing plan working group. I think we are in this sort of tipping point here where we're trying to understand what we should do, what's the right thing to do. I think we've heard about the urgency for our businesses, for the need for creating housing choice. There isn't really an opportunity for us to wait on that issue. It is urgent. We are obviously seeing challenges to an analysis of infrastructure costs. You also notice that of the 177 towns that have been asked to consider this, a significant majority, over 60%, I think the number is closer to 70, might be higher, are actually looking very hard at figuring out ways to do this. So that means that there aren't a lot of people who are worried about lawsuits. I don't think you think about lawsuits. I think you think about what's the right thing to do to solve a regional problem. And then I think we have a significant board and community that can figure these things out. So I think for us to consider this as the right move forward now is for us to support this neighborhood housing plan, because what we have heard is that keeping a base plan is not going to see any change. We know we need to incentivize change, and the neighborhood housing plan is that plan. I think we have to decide now as a community that we really can't wait. We have a town that has the ability to analyze things and to adapt over time, and I think we will probably implement those strategies. But we also know that the town has analyzed all the impacts from this very carefully with the people who know the most about it, which is our DPW and our town boards. So I would like to suggest that we actually have respect for the work that's been done. It's been considerable, and that we make a decision as a town what we want to be and how welcoming we want to be and how do we want to address the needs we have, which are significant for creating housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Anyone else online? Anyone else here who would like to speak? Motion by Paul, second by Adam. I'm going to take a vote. Justin,
What was the motion? I don't even, sorry.
To close the hearing.
to close the hearing.
Close the hearing, yeah. Aye.
Adam Block,
Aye, check.
Paul Alpert,
Aye.
Artie Crocker,
Aye.
and I, the chair, Natasha Spada, say aye, so it's unanimous. So thank you all for coming. It's really helpful for us to hear all of your comments. Wait, we're not finished. We just closed the hearing. We didn't close the planning board. For those of you that are dying to stay, we're just going to give some report. We have a couple.
I'm still here, Natasha.
No, just we have the meeting scheduled, I think, for the 17th to review the zoning and make our recommendation.
Okay. Well, there's the 24th.
The 24th is too late. I want to do it on the 17th and
Do it on the 24th.
Okay.
have a conversation and get it in finalized form. And then we've got a spare week in case there's an issue.
Any other, no one else?
No,
has any?
close
And so one
the meeting.
other, just, I have to give the correspondence just really quickly. We got emails, August 24th from Karen Partridge, August 27th from Catherine Soderholm, August 28th from Bill King, August 29th from Mark Ravener, September 3rd from Paula Dickerman, September 5th from the Needham Housing Coalition. So with that, is there a motion?
Motion to
So, and second, so, all in favor? Oh, wait, Justin?
Well, I see. I still,
Adjourn.
I'm assuming it's a motion to
I
adjourn.
would just say that maybe we ought to acknowledge any emails that we've received as comments on this hearing through the time that they're received until the close of this hearing.
Okay. So let's vote.
We have a
Okay.
motion to adjourn, Justin.
So hold on, there was a motion to adjourn. There was a second, and
There was
apparently.
a second by Paul. And we're taking a vote, and you're first.
Okay, so I vote aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Artie, and I, the chair, aye. So thank you all.